her career in a true lean organization where she learned to lead and implement QI work. Her experience spans 6 different countries and several industries, including banking, telecom, manufacturing, and healthcare. Genevieve works closely with Villa Colombo and is currently partnering with Extendicare Canada. One of her favorite organizational approaches is lean, because changing processes sparks changes in the organization. It fosters collaboration and gets staff working cross-functionally. Rebecca Scott-Ron is Regional Director of the Extendicare Assist. Prior to moving to operations, she was the National Director of Communications and Strategic Partnerships, also with Extendicare. She previously worked in politics and is now very happy to be impacting change on the ground. Nikki Mann joined Villa Colombo's Services for Seniors in 1989 as a healthcare aide and is now the Director of Resident Services. Nikki attended the McMaster Summer Institutes for Geriatrics, is Montessori-based dementia programming certified, and is PIECES trained. She continues as the psychogeriatric resource person for the facility and is a certified crisis prevention intervention instructor. In addition, Nikki is on the faculty with Seneca College as an adult education for the practical nursing program and clinical instructor for George Brown, Centennial, Ryerson, Bachelor in Science of Nursing, Collaborative Nursing Program students for the first year placement. Nikki, very impressive. Please, welcome.
Thank you, Ruth. So I'm Rebecca, of all those, just so you know who I was. And I just moved yesterday. So I think I am suffering from relocation stress syndrome. Who here has moved before? I think most of us have likely moved before. And Colleen did a great job of expressing to us some of those challenges that are cognitively well long-term care residents can feel. And we've certainly felt many of those stresses when we've moved ourselves. But that's certainly compounded by the fact that many of our residents can't plan for this move. They often maybe haven't prepared for the move, and they may not have the ability, time, or capacity to actually think about the move in advance. So it can be very, very difficult for them. So we really wanted to focus on how we could improve the admissions for our residents into long-term care. And who's we? Well, the 3 organizations that Ruth mentioned. First is Extendicare Assist. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are the management and consulting arm of Extendicare. And we partner with long-term care providers to help them manage their long-term care homes. And one of our partners is Villa Colombo, Homes for the Aged here in Toronto. They're a 391-bed, culturally specific, so Italian long-term care home. And so the 2 of us were partners, and we both had our quality improvement journey. We've been moving along our quality improvement journey, been involved with Health Quality Ontario. We've used the Model for Improvement and other performance improvement initiatives and tools, but we had heard about lean. Hospitals had used lean. We heard about lean in different places. So we wanted to see what more we could do with lean and how we could apply that to a long-term care setting. There wasn't anyone within our organization that we felt had the specific expertise. So we reached out to someone who had a black belt in lean, and that is Genevieve Lukenda-Lund, who was mentioned before. So we brought Jen in, and our 3 organizations sat down and talked about what project we wanted to focus on. And that's how we came up with admissions, for all of those reasons that I'd mentioned before, but also because it was a specific process that we could focus on. And more importantly, it was a process that would have great impact, we felt, for residents and their families, but also for our staff, because there were a lot of staff members that also found anxiety at the time of admission. And this was the type of project where we could involve the multidisciplinary team. Every single person in the home is involved in admission. So we brought the whole team together, and now I'll turn it over to Jen and Nikki to tell you a little bit more about our results.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. So part of my presentation is talking about the results of the project. And before I get started, how many of you are working in a long-term facility right now? Operationally, management? I've got a few in the room, good. I had lunch with the ADOCs of Villa Colombo a couple of weeks ago, and I asked them, how am I gonna get your attention? And they said, ask them if they want the ministry off their backs. And so I'm saying, if you're here, you know that admissions is the first line of defense when it comes to the ministry walking in. So I'm going to start my presentation with 5 yellow balls and something in the middle. And I've already skipped the, oh, this moves it too. What we did is when we looked at currently how the admissions process was working, we wanted to see, well, what kind of time, how much time are we spending on admission and how much time are we not really spending on admission? Take in mind that Villa Colombo has over 100 admissions a year. It's quite a bit of time. Through the project, we identified 1,000 hours of time that we could redirect back into admissions or redirect back into nursing. 1,000 hours is half of an FTE over the course of a year. To make things a little bit more easier for the staff when we were working with the project, we tried to label the bottlenecks that we were finding in the process. And one of the bottlenecks that I'll refer to was rework. There was 50% of that time was going to people going in and reworking. So as an example, the RNs were typically in charge of doing the admissions. Is that happening in your homes? You have specific people, right? So sometimes they have their days off, they have their doctor's days, they're ill, they can't be there, so someone else has to take over the admission. That person doesn't necessarily have the insight to do the admission. So what happens, the RN comes back a few days later and spends half of her shift fixing it. So imagine if we can do it right the first time. So that was one of the biggest ones we found. A little bit about the results before we started and after. Before, when we talked to our team, we saw that we weren't compliant. Our villa was not compliant with their admission assessments. Nurses were complaining about constant interruptions when they were performing their admissions. They would get pulled out of an admission with a family, so it wasn't very smooth. Room was never ready. A pillow would get pulled at the last minute, the drapes were missing, the toilet was broken. Other people, the resident formerly who was there, their things were still in the room. Has that happened to you? Uh-huh. Complaints. We had families complaining because they were losing the laundry. They just moved in and we've managed to lose the laundry. Oh my God. Another thing is labeling and inventory should be done on the shift the day of the admission coming in. It wasn't happening. It was happening the day after and so on. So we pulled a project team together, about 12 of us, representing different roles within the organization. So anybody who had a hand in the admissions process, we brought them in. So we had registered staff, PSWs on different shifts. We had housekeeping, maintenance, laundry. We had management in there as well. Across culture, across the organization to hear what their perspectives were. We also had the schedule in there as well. And we asked them 5 questions. You know, how are you feeling about your admissions today? And we got a score of 2.7. Now fast forward 20 weeks later, after working on the admissions process and working with them, we asked them the same questions and all of a sudden they're happier. They're at 3.2. And the main reason, the feedback from them was, we don't want to go back to that way of working. We like the way we're working. And of course they are, because their admissions are 100% compliant to this day. They are compliant. So this is from the summer. No more interruptions. The nursing staff has the time to sit with the family. The room is always ready. No more lost clothing. And the labeling and laundry inventory gets done the day of. Are you impressed? Do I still have your attention? Good. Looking at assessments. So the hardest one that we had was bowel and bladder. Does anybody have challenges with bowel and bladder? Yes, holy smokes, that one was hard. So you'll see our black line here. Here you'll see just the compliance, how well we were doing over a period of time. That black line represented so many PDSAs. Are you familiar with PDSAs? We had a lot of those because it's complex. You have not only the complexity of the time, it takes 14 days to close the assessment, but you have the complexity of so many different roles. You have registered staff involved, you have PSWs involved, and getting all of those teams together, working together to close that assessment was a real challenge. If we look at the red line across, nutrition was pretty easy. It's one person, one responsibility, one deadline. And then we have falls here that wasn't as complicated because we're working just with registered staff with a very defined deadline. So I'm going to move on. I'm sure you've heard of process maps, and I'm going to show you an example of what our current, just a snapshot of what the current process map looked like. And this is a little picture of the mess we made in the current situation. What I want to point out is when you do this work, it's great to do it in swim lanes. And what I mean by swim lanes is that you see how they go from left to right, the process, and we have the different roles. It's really great in workshop form with organizations because they can see their role on the process map. You get to see, you answer the question of who does what and when. And also visually, you can see how much time you're spending on each step, and our red stars denote the bottlenecks. So it's great for us as a discussion piece to say, hey, we've got bottlenecks here, here, and here, and this is what we want to address. Moving on to a future state process map, you'll see we only have one swim lane, and what we have here is an admission lead, and I just skipped it, sorry. The admission lead, what has changed is that instead of going from one RPN being solely in charge of the admissions process, an admission lead can be anybody. It can be an RPN or it can be an RPN. It does an RN or an RPN. It doesn't matter who's on that shift that day. Everybody knows how to do it. It's one standard process. All the checklists, all the questionnaires, everything is the same. Villa Colombo has 5 floors. If someone's short on the 4th floor and has an admission, they can call someone from the 2nd to step in and do the admission. They all know how to do it. Lastly, what I'm going to touch upon is visual management. So one thing about Lean is, yes, it's process mapping within a group across collaboration. The other piece is being as visual as you possibly can. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is this lovely purple bag. It's big and it's purple, and everybody remembers it. And that purple bag represents when the resident comes in and we can't label their clothes that day, it goes in the purple bag and down the chute. Everybody knows the color of that purple bag. Everybody knows that is an admission bag. On top of that, there are 2 uses for it. On top of it, it's an internal control for the process. So there are only 5 bags throughout all of Villa Colombo. Villa Colombo has 391 beds, 5 floors, 5 bags, all labeled 1 to 5. When that purple bag gets to the admissions coordinator and she knows one is missing, she stops the process. Not, of course, when there's a family there, but she knows that there's something wrong, and she goes back to this team and says, hey, find our bags. And that happened over the summer when you've got, different people working, different staff, they don't know what the purple bag is. We found them in the drawers and the closets, but the point is that we have an internal control now. So that's the purple bag. The last piece I'm going to talk about here is our whiteboards. Has anybody worked with whiteboards or heard of whiteboards? Yeah? So we have one on each floor, each unit, so there are 9 whiteboards up at Villa. And the purpose of this is that the admissions team huddled or debriefed the day after their admission to see if they nailed the assessments, if they were late, why, or if there were any other issues regarding the room, maintenance, anything. There's also space on this whiteboard to do a root cause analysis. So as a team, they could sit down and ask the question 5 whys. What is the root cause of this problem and how are we going to fix it? When they've done the root cause, then they action plan. What's the task that needs to get done? When is it going to get done? And who's going to do it? And that was a real challenge for some of the team leads to put someone else's name down on the board so that everybody could see it. It was a change, a positive change, because now, and this is what Nikki's going to get into, now everyone wants to do an admission because they like it. They know what's expected of them. It's no longer a hot potato. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Nikki. She's going to talk about the softer side of change when it comes to Lean. Thank you.
Just to make sure I have this right. I do. Thank you. As for the whole project in itself, it's still ongoing. It's going to continue to improve because it's continuous improvement all the time. But what we did take away from the project, and we've adapted other projects, is for anything you do, there has to be a standardized process in place. We have 5 floors, but we have 9 units. And on each unit, everyone was doing things differently. So you need to have a standardized, uniform process in how you're doing everything. As far as the admissions process go, there were checklists. We only had our RNs that were doing admissions. Now our RPNs are doing them. During the time that this project was being rolled out, we had leads. We had RPN, RN leads. We had coach, I'm sorry, how would I phrase that? We had the leads that would step in, the coaches, sorry, I was using the right word. We had coaches that would step in and support the other registered staff. So we identified coaches. It's always do one, you learn one, do one, teach one, right? As far as schooling goes. Well, that's exactly what our coaches did. They learned the process as far as the admission process went. They taught it. They would do it and then they would teach it on. So that way all our registered staff were equipped, had the tools to do the admission process at any point in time. So we didn't have to have someone stepping in and being pulled from other floors, because that was a big hindrance in making sure that our admission process runs smoothly. The other part to that was accountability. How many of our staff really know what they're responsible and accountable for? So we put time frames down, we put guidelines down, we set expectations with our staff to what needed to be done. Days have certain roles, evenings have certain roles, and nights have them. So we just realigned them to make sure that everyone was doing them correctly and we're able to meet them. As far as management, how many times do we ever have discussion with our staff? Usually we find gaps, we find inconsistencies, and we go right to discipline. We go to performance. Well, we changed that culture around. We started asking the questions. We started asking what was happening, why work wasn't being done. And when we opened those discussions up, we realized that there was a lot that was happening, that the staff weren't comfortable bringing forward, and because they were fearful of discipline. But when we had those discussions and we made light talk of it, we're able to turn things around and have them participate and come up with the solutions. And the last thing is that any change, to have change, you need to empower the staff. They need to be part of what's happening, and they need to start resolving issues at the front line. We can't resolve them for them as far as management goes. They need to identify it and make the corrections right there. And that's what our staff are doing right now. They identify what's not working, and they come up with the solutions. Instead of giving the monkey to me to deal with, they deal with it themselves and come back with solutions for us. Jen was talking about the 1,000 hours that go back, which is equivalent to about a half FTE. And how we're going to represent that is time that's given back to the resident or to the other departments. That's the laser. With our laundry aide coming in at admission and doing the labeling right then and there, that time is opened up. So she's not running around the facility looking for when there's inventory done on the clothing and then it's passed back out. We're a large facility, 391 beds. She's constantly moving back and forth, taking the laundry, labeling it, and bringing it back up from the basement. So she's doing it right on the spot. So that's time saved right there. We have the nurses who are more organized. They know what they're doing, and they're not as anxious anymore. They have disrupted time. They're not interrupted during their time. It's dedicated time to do the process, to do the whole admission, because what happened was that they'd be doing the admission process, they'd be doing the interview and getting all the information, all the medications, everything about the patient, but something would be happening out on the floor, so they'd be called out on the floors. So there'd be constant interruptions happening. So we changed that process that our registered staff go downstairs into our what we call the harvest room and tag team with our dietary aide, because there's so many interviews happening. You're meeting with a dietitian, you're meeting with the nurses, you're meeting with physiotherapy, you're meeting with other departments, that we put the team together because they're asking the same questions. And the last thing you want to do is inundate the families and the residents with the same questions over and over and over again. So we put that together. So there was quite a bit of time that was saved, and in respect to processes, it's just more efficient now for us. We got feedback. So what was the family's experience so far? Our family council said it was great. There's no more concerns as far as lost clothing goes, and adjustment timelines to getting for the grieving families. We know that we only have a short time, or a turnaround time to get admissions coming in. So residents that do pass away, and we have residents that are coming in, we have a short time frame. We were only using 24 to 48 hours, and our families were getting very upset with us. So we have the time to adapt and change guide timelines. So what we did is we moved it to every 72 hours, we'll be able to support the family and get the process going for admission. Voice of the family. The one thing when we look back, we think about is that we didn't get the full view of what the family was experiencing. We involved everybody. We involved family council. We involved resident council. We spoke to all our staff, all the departments, but we didn't look at it from the lens of what the family was experiencing. What was their emotion? What were they dealing with? What were their what were other issues that were going on that we could have had more insight to? Had we spent a little bit more time recognizing their feelings of guilt, their anxieties, and building that into the process, which we didn't do. But we're looking at that, and we need to be proactive in respect to that and looking at it from there. So how are we sustaining this, and what are some of the measurement tools that came out of this? Sorry, I need to step away. We have CQI monthly meetings, and we could do updates as far as the admission process goes and all the assessments. Our documentation is, there's auditing being done. There's auditing being done on our documentation. It's not just an audit to capture what was done. We take it a step further. They'll get everything done, but it's the quality of the data. So we take a deep dive in the quality of the data, because that is what's going to generate our care plans. I missed something there, but anyways, I only have a little bit of time, right? Okay, I'm good. Okay, so just documentation. We developed quality corners. The whiteboard that Jen was talking about, we developed quality corners there. So any high risk areas that we have within the home, projects that we're taking on, we put onto a whiteboard, and we identify unit specific. We gather data at this level right here, but we need to take it right to the front line. As far as falls go, and take it to the unit and identify it there. And that's where we're able to identify and put interventions in place. And that's what we're able to do right now. We have quality corners on each unit for high risk projects, such as increase in falls. So the knowledge has spread to other projects, example for falls, and we're sharing all our progress and information with our Board of Governors. So the lean process is trickled down into other projects, and we continue to adapt and use it.
So the nice thing about the lean process as well is the fact that we are able to take those process maps that we developed and share them with our other partner homes and with our other Extendicare homes. So that's what we've been able to do now, is take the tools and the ideas and the tips that Nikki and Jen talked about, and take those successes and roll them out to other homes. So we've got projects happening all across the province now where we're using the admissions process, but also we're using the same ideas and principles from lean to apply them to other processes that may happen in long-term care homes. So we're really excited about the lean project, and we're especially excited about the results that we got from admissions. So the final slide here is just our contact information. So if you are interested in having any more of the information, I know the slides will be made available. I encourage you to have a look at those process maps and to take some of the ideas that Nikki and Jen presented, because they really have been successful and can be successful in other homes as well, as we've seen. Thank you very much.